Okay, welcome to video number 34 of the Diaries of a Coronavirologist YouTube channel. Today is the 2nd of September and we are up to nearly 26 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 and almost 860,000 confirmed deaths around the world. So today I just want to do a quick video, a little bit shorter, a little bit different style to usual. I'm not going to really dissect any papers this time. I just want to talk about a couple of little snippets of information, really, things that have come across my plate over the past week. So the first and main thing I want to talk about is reinfection. So last week I put up a video talking about the first well-confirmed case of SARS2 reinfection in Hong Kong in a 33-year-old man, and I talked about the fact that this person didn't develop any symptoms upon reinfection and how potentially that was an optimistic result or optimistic case, and that people who may be susceptible to getting reinfection may only develop mild symptoms. Pretty much no sooner had I put that online, I saw reports of a reinfection case in Reno, Nevada, in the United States, of someone who developed more severe symptoms. So pretty much within a day of putting my video out online saying perhaps everyone will be asymptomatic on reinfection, there was a case of someone getting more severe infection. So this time it was a 25-year-old male patient in Reno, Nevada, who developed symptoms of COVID-19, classic fever, cough, nausea, headache, diarrhea, those kind of things, in around the end of April, and then tested positive for SARS2, so it was a true case of COVID-19. They were kept in isolation for a few weeks and then were eventually released upon 2 negative tests. So typical kind of procedure, positive case, then 2 negative tests and considered clear of the virus. However, around 48 days later, this individual started to develop the same kind of symptoms, developing a fever and a headache and a cough and all those kind of things. And they went to the doctor and they were checked out. An X-ray didn't show any issues in their lungs, and they were therefore released because it was assumed it wasn't a COVID reinfection. It was assumed it was some other general viral infection or any kind of infection, really. Those are pretty generalized symptoms, a cough, a sore throat, a fever, that can describe a lot of different things. So it wasn't thought this was a COVID case. Anyway, a few days after that release, the patient's symptoms got more severe, and they ended up going to the emergency unit and were deemed to be hypoxic and had to be put on supplemental oxygen. They then got a positive COVID test back, so they were found to be positive for SARS2, and at this stage they were hospitalized, having to receive the supplemental oxygen. Now, 48 days between the first bout of infection and the second bout isn't particularly long, so it's possible that the person didn't fully clear that virus from the first time around. It may have just dropped to undetectable levels and then had a resurgence, which caused the hypoxia and the more severe symptoms. However, the researchers associated with this work went and took samples from the second bout of infection and from the banked samples from the first bout of infection, and they did the full genome sequencing that I was describing in the last video about the Hong Kong patient. This showed that the viruses were significantly different. There were mutations that were seen in the first infection and other mutations seen in the second compared to reference sequences, and they weren't necessarily always well matched. So it really looks like these are different viral infections, suggesting the patient was indeed reinfected. So it's somewhat worrying to see a patient develop SARS2, develop mild symptoms, the generalized fever, cough, headache, etc., and then recover, test negative, and then be reinfected and develop much more severe symptoms, needing to be hospitalized and put on supplemental oxygen. However, there's no need to necessarily hit the panic button just yet. This doesn't ruin every hope for a vaccine and ruin the fears that you can develop immunity if you are indeed infected. What this just might point out is rare cases. Again, as I talked about on the last video, there are so many cases of SARS2, unfortunately, there's 26 million, that we're going to find rare things happening. We're looking at this so intently that we're going to pick out rare events. So it's possible that this patient just didn't develop a good immune response the first time around. They may have just got a very low dose of the virus and developed very mild symptoms and not really triggered much of an immune response. There were no blood samples taken on the first infection, so we can't confirm if they developed any antibodies. There was blood drawn the second time around and they were positive for antibodies then, but we don't know if that was from the first infection or from the second infection. It's hard to know and it's hard to tell. So it's possible this person was a rare individual who just didn't develop any kind of immune response the first time round, and so therefore was still susceptible to being infected with this virus. As I say, this may just be a rare event that we're picking up because we are studying this so intently and we have so many cases. So where I sort of stand with this at the minute is I don't think that we need to panic about the idea of people developing natural immunity when they're infected. I think we're going to be finding these rare instances of reinfection. I've seen a few reports of other cases in Europe, particularly Belgium and I think Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where there were also asymptomatic reinfections. So perhaps this person who developed a more severe infection is just an even more outlier of the more outliers of the reinfections. It's hard to know at this stage. Again, as I said in my last video, we need more time. The more time we have, the more study we have, the more cases we get, the more we're going to learn. These reinfection cases obviously take time. 48 days for this person is very short, but let's say it was 3 months. We're on a lag of 3 months from when there were significantly fewer cases than there are now. So 3 months from now, we may know a lot more about whether reinfection really is common or whether indeed it is exceedingly rare and we're just pulling out those rare cases. But as I said already, I don't think we need to panic about vaccines. Vaccines elicit much stronger immune responses and they can be designed to do so. I think this is just those strange cases where people can become reinfected. But I do think an important takeaway from the fact that we are seeing reinfection cases, be it asymptomatic or more severe symptoms, or even just generally symptomatic, is that approaching this outbreak and trying to hit natural herd immunity without a vaccine is not going to be a viable approach to control it. If we take the approach of let it burn, find herd immunity, and reinfection does indeed start happening, and if indeed there are more severe cases, this doesn't seem like a safe way to approach things. So again, we need more time, we need more data to assess whether reinfection is really something that happens, but I think it's pointing towards herd immunity, at least natural herd immunity, not being a good way to tackle this. With a vaccine, that will be different. The other thing I wanted to briefly tackle tonight is the story that's been doing the rounds, and I'm going to actually say the conspiracy theory that's been doing the rounds, that the CDC have supposedly admitted that only 6% of the COVID deaths are due to SARS2, or are actually COVID-19, or whatever the wording is. So this is just factually wrong. The United States has had about 185,000 deaths from COVID-19, and if anything, this is probably an underestimate. It is not only 6% of that number that is the true death toll. This 6% number comes from the fact that it's now established, or has been said by the CDC, that 94% of the people that have died from COVID-19 have other health conditions or other things on their death certificate, be that comorbidities or other issues that have led to their death. Now, some of these are directly caused by the virus. So that is a death from SARS2, even though it's not just COVID-19 alone on the death certificate, which is that 6%. So things like pneumonia, things like acute respiratory distress syndrome are brought on by this viral infection, and they are killing people. That makes up part of the 94%. In addition, there is all of the comorbidities. So people who are obese, people who have diabetes, for example, they are much more likely to die from this viral infection. On their death certificate, it's going to have things like heart failure, because those people have high blood pressure, hypertension, other things that are causing issues to their heart. They then get infected by SARS2, they mount this massive immune response to it, this inflammatory response, and that puts the extra strain on their body that leads to heart failure. So it's still a death from this virus, even though there are other causes. So that's all part of the 94% as well. So to say that only 6% of people are dying, or only 6% of people have died from this virus is just plain wrong. I heard a wonderful metaphor to describe this, or I read, and I can't remember where I read it, and I can't remember who said it, so I'm really apologetic to whoever came up with it, because I think it's a great way to describe it. Haemophilia is a bleeding disorder where you can't clot your blood, and this can be life-threatening to people who get cut and they bleed a lot. They need to take clotting factors to help their blood clot. If a haemophiliac gets stabbed and bleeds out, that is still a knife murder. That is not a haemophilia death. Haemophilia contributed to the death. They've bled out, they're a haemophiliac, but the knife is what killed them. COVID, SARS2, is equivalent to the knife in this analogy. Another analogy or metaphor, I always forget which, sorry for anyone who's a stickler on the English front. Another metaphor I heard was, if someone with cancer gets hit by a bus, that's still going down as a traffic accident, not a cancer death. Again, COVID is the bus. I think that one could possibly be altered. So let's say if someone who's blind gets hit by a bus, being blind contributed to getting hit by a bus. The bus is what killed them. So obesity, cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, all these things contribute to a death from COVID-19. But it is the viral infection that is killing these people. So this number of 6% that's going around is just not right, and it's a fallacy to make that suggestion. So hopefully these metaphors help explain that a little bit. And my final ridiculous comparison, just to throw one extra one in, if people want to make the argument that only 6% of the deaths from COVID-19 count because only 6% have just COVID-19 on the death certificate, that would mean we've just cured AIDS. Hooray! No one dies directly of AIDS. AIDS destroys the immune system and something else comes along and infects you and kills you. So if you just have to die from HIV alone, we've just solved AIDS. As I say, it's not a sensible argument that's being made. These deaths are from COVID. Other things are associated with it. The virus is more severe in people that have health issues. This is well established for coronaviruses, but that doesn't mean we can only count 6% of the deaths being caused by this virus. Anyway, with those things said, thank you for watching. Please remember to drop a like if you find the videos useful and interesting, and remember to subscribe if you're new around here. Alternatively, follow me over on Twitter. I talk about SARS things over there, and I post when I put new videos up. Feel free to leave comments and questions down below. I'll do my best to tackle them either in the comments section or on future videos. And please share these videos with anyone who might find them useful as well. Anyway, as always, please stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and keep calm and carry on. We will get through this pandemic.